right, good morning and happy Thursday, you guys. All right, so for our last lesson for this week, we're going to be talking about inequalities today. Okay, so I'm going to dive into it in a second. Just a couple of updates. Again, on Friday, you can totally come to campus tomorrow, and from 8 to 12, pick up packets for next week. There should be enough there. Um, you can do that. Everything will be on Google Classroom as well. So if you're looking for one place where everything is, that's a great resource to use. Um, and a couple of things about science fair and young authors before we get into math. Um, for science fair, you just need to either email Mrs. Gonzalez a video of you doing your mini presentation, and then give me any of the written portions, because I'm going to check off that you did all of those pieces and kind of give you a grade for that. Um, and then combined with Mrs. Gonzalez's video grade, that's where you'll get your actual science fair grade from. So you can either most likely just email her that, and then that'll be the easiest. If you prefer to do a Zoom video with her, you can absolutely reach out and email her that, and set up a time to do that. For young authors, Ms. D said that it's technically doesn't have to be due next week with Young Authors Night when it was supposed to be. But we did pretty much decide that when you are done with Young Authors, you're done with writing class, so you might want to just get it done when it was supposed to be due as best as possible. And so you should just email her all of the parts. If you want it binded or anything like that, just let us know. We can work with you on that, and Mrs. Hoy can help us, okay? All right, so getting into inequalities, I'm going to go ahead and share you a better version of the notes. All righty, so here we go. So we have our notes right here. So the first thing we're going to look at is this right side over here, okay? Because this is all the different steps, which looks a little crazy, but this is a great place to look for a good reminder, okay? So as you know, and you've worked with for years since you were probably in like first grade, we have greater than and less than here, right? So greater than 4 is greater than 2, and less than 3 is less than 12. And a lot of the tricks are like, the alligator is going to eat the larger number and all of that good stuff. Now, in sixth grade, we start to get into greater than or equal to and less than or equal to. And that's because we get things like variables on one side or expressions on one side and all that kind of good stuff. Okay, so this is really about reading a sentence and breaking it down. Okay. Now, what this means is when you have something like x is greater than or equal to 5, what they're saying is that any number that x is representing, there's any number that is greater than 5 or is 5 can fit into x. So it could be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, up into infinity could fit in that problem, right? So, but it does include 5, which is the important part, okay? That's what that equal to means. And then down here, less than or equal to means that any number that's less than or equal to 10 could fit in here for this x. So that means it could be 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, all the way down into the negatives, okay? So that's what that means, alrighty. Now, for this particular practice sheet, you're going to have a lot of moments where you are reading a sentence and you're going to have to kind of go through it and set up what your inequality is going to be, which can be a little tough, which is why I wrote out very detailed notes of how to do it. Now, it's okay if you don't go through and actually underline things and stuff like that. That's totally fine. I just want you to practice picking out those clue words. That's really, really important. Okay. So the inequality that they give us is the quotient of x and 3 is less than or equal to 5. So the first step is to read the statement twice. And the reason I say twice is because a lot of times we don't really read it the first time. We're just kind of like, okay, yeah, there's words. And it's really, really important to actually read what we need to do. So again, the quotient of x and 3 is less than or equal to 5. Right? So we've read it twice now. And the next thing we're going to do is underline the operation. So the operation it's telling us is quotient. And we know that quotient signals to us division. Okay. So we underline quotient just to remind us. Okay. And I wrote down here quotient signals division. So I know we're going to use division. Okay. The next thing is to circle the terms you're going to use that operation with. So what are we going to use division with? And it says the quotient of, so it tells me x and 3. So I circled those to know, okay, this is what I'm working with here. The next piece is to underline what inequality you will use. So which of these 4 inequalities you're going to use. And it says less than or equal to. Okay, so I underline that so I remind myself, okay, so I've got division happening of x and 3 and less than or equal to. And then we're going to identify the number for the other side of that inequality. So what comes after that sign for less than or equal to? And it says 5, right? So now we're going to have to write it out, which is, you got to use a little bit of problem solving here, okay? And you have to move things around a little bit. But writing it out, so it said it was the quotient of x, so that means x divided by 3, because remember x and 3, the quotient of those, is less than or equal to 5. Now down here you'll see the color-coded version where you can see all the different parts of where things came from. And then over here on the side, you can see the 2 different ways you can write this. You can either write x divided by 3 is less than or equal to 5, okay? Or x over 5 is less than or equal to 5. And that just is 2 different ways to write division. Either way is fine, whichever you prefer, and whichever is best for your eyes to see in your brain. So basically what this means is if you plug in a number for 3, the answer of, say, 15 divided by 3 needs to be less than or equal to 5. Now 15 would work because it's 5. 15 divided by 3 is 5. So you don't have to solve them or anything like that. It's just practicing writing them out. Okay. So I'm going to leave this up for a second. So if you want to pause here and just have this open for you while you're working through things. And then in a moment, I'm going to switch over to our practice sheet so we can take a look at that. Right. Stop the share of this guy. And then I am going to share this. Oopsies. Okay, there we go. All right, so we did the first one up here together. So the quotient of x and 3 is less than or equal to 5. So I'm going to go ahead and just write, we had x divided by 3 is less than or equal to 5. Okay, so that's what we got there for our answer. I know this doesn't look very pretty. I am anxiously awaiting a little like notepad thing that can connect to my computer so that I can handwrite things instead of scribbling them with my mouse pad because it is so hard on my trackpad. I am constantly laughing at myself. It's really fun. All right, so the next one is the difference between x and 4 is greater than 10. Okay, so let's think here. we're going to read it again, right? Because that's our next step. So the difference between x and 4 is greater than 10. So I know, okay, so the first step is underline the operation. So we've got difference. And I know difference signals to me subtraction. So I'm going to write a little minus sign above. And then the two terms we're looking at, it tells us x and 4. Okay. So we're looking at the difference between x and 4. And then it's going to be greater than 10. Okay. So the difference, so we got x and 4, and we're talking about the difference of those. And then that's got to be greater than 10. All right. So again, the difference between x and 4 is greater than 10. You have x minus 4 is greater than 10. So what that means is basically like you would have to eventually, when we get into, you know, when we get into solving these and things like that, mostly in 7th grade, that's where you're going to see like what would you plug in for x and stuff like that. But right now we're just practicing writing them from basically a word problem into an inequality, which is a little hard, but it's a really good problem solving skill for you guys to have, and it really helps get into your critical thinking, because I know that sometimes right now especially, I want to keep a lot of that critical thinking at the forefront of your mind when you're doing math, because that is going to help you long term, versus throwing too much at you and long stuff. So I hope that you guys are doing okay with this. We'll do one more together, because I think it's really important for you guys to see how this one can be written multiple ways. And you get to see a really great example as to why we've stopped using x to represent multiplication. So the product of x and 7 is not greater than 21. Okay, that's a tricky one. All right, so we're going to reread it, right? The product of x and 7 is not greater than 21. Interesting. All right. So here we're going to start with, so product. We know that product signals multiplication. Now I'm going to write a dot here because that reminds me that multiplication can be represented by a dot. Okay. Which we're going to say in a second is why that's important. And it's saying of x and 7. Okay. And then it's saying not greater than. Okay. So if it's not greater than, multiplying those two are not going to be greater than, I'm thinking that that must mean that it's less than. It's kind of tricky, right? So the opposite of greater than is less than. And then of 21. All right. So there's a couple of ways we can write this, all right, to represent the product of x and 7, okay? We can either do x times 7 with the dot. We can write it x, 7x. Remember, if they're right next to each other, that equals multiplication. Or we can do 7 and then use those parentheses around x, okay? Either one of these three ways would work. What will not work and will look really funky is if you try to do something like x, that's a terrible x, I'm sorry, times 7. That looks confusing. Do not do that. It's weird and ugly. Don't do that one, okay? So looking at 7x, it's not going to be greater than 21. Okay, so that is how we would write that, all on all options, less than 21. And I know that's a really confusing way to word things, but it's really good, again, for you guys to think about things, different words that can tell you like, hey, this is the inequality we're talking about. These are the different operations we're talking about. What is a really useful resource if you're like, I really don't know what this would mean, you guys can always hop on Google and look it up. That's using your resources. That's not cheating. That's literally doing what you're supposed to do. And especially in um, the state in which we're in right now. Okay. So please be sure that you're remembering that. Okay. You can always use Google, ask your parents, grandparents, siblings, especially if they're older. The younger ones might not be able to be very helpful, especially if they're like, in primary. Um, but you never know. Sometimes they like give you the right answer. So just go ahead and keep that in mind. Okay. So I am going to stop sharing this. All right. So that is our inequality lesson for today. Okay. I'm going to post this onto Google Classroom. It'll also be on YouTube so you can find it and in the email as always. Um, so just let me know if you have any questions. Okay, you guys. Sorry, this is really distracting today. I got blue light glasses because I started getting a headache from staring at a screen all day, which I've never had that problem because I usually don't stare at a screen all day. And this is the first day I'm making a video with it, and it's highly, highly distracting. So you guys can see how quarantine is going for Miss Albertoni. I'm just as distracted as you guys probably are about 80% of the time, to be honest. All right, so let me know if you guys have any questions, okay? I planned everything out for next week. There is your other for next week is literally just a multiplication division page of like basic facts from 1 to 12. And it's just meant for you guys to kind of practice that. So that can be done at any point during next week. So I just want to give you a reminder of that. So you really only technically have 3 math lessons next week. You have 4 assignments, but only 3 lessons. So I tried to be a little bit nicer. Let's hope. All right. So let me know if you guys have any questions, and I will see you soon. Bye.